Hello, and welcome to another episode of Mazars COVID Talks. Mazars COVID Talks is a podcast about pandemic resilience aimed at supporting business survival by directing organizations to resources and embedding a culture of preparedness. Today is April 7th, 2020, and my name is Tashonda Hagerbrook. I'm from the Organizational Resilience Practice, and we are joined by one of our co-hosts, Alicia. We haven't heard from you in a while. How are you doing?
Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be back, and I'm looking forward to discussing the madness of the PPP.
Sure you have a lot to add to that topic, right? We are joined by two guests today, and really excited to get into this real estate topic. We have John Confrey, who's a senior manager in the Mazars Real Estate Audit and Advisory Group. He's also a member of the Mazars COVID Business Advisory Task Force. So hopefully we can get into a little bit about what that's about, right? We also have Carlos Martins, who's a partner in the Real Estate Services Group. So welcome, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
It's great to have you here. There's been so much talk about the CARES Act, and we've tried to get into some of the focused topics there, but one of the arenas we've not gotten to get into was real estate. So it was a big part of the reason why we wanted to kind of have you guys come in and share some information to the listeners and just kind of have a conversation about what you've been seeing and what you think is important that people need to hear about. So
great. No, it's certainly been a lot of madness for sure in conversation. So as we're trying to get our hands wrapped around this whole thing, we see a lot of our clients in need and trying to get some clarity out of everything that's come out of this. So our focus really with the CARES Act has been, to help our clients, guide them now with the first phase of this, which is really getting comfortable with, what are the financial needs that the organizations need and how we can help. And we've clearly have talked about PPP in various podcasts before, and how it impacts real estate has been a bit tricky, obviously, but that's something we can speak about. And that's really our phase one, really, which is the immediate. What are the next 90 days look like for our clients, and how we can help. We clearly have other items in the CARES Act that are impacting real estate. And we want to get to that, but we see that that's going to be a phase two type of approach, which we see that it's not as time sensitive. We clearly know that there's some tax credits and relief that are available in the real estate space that people have started to talk about. I know that we'll have our partners, Kyle and Lisa, speak respectively to some of the tax credits that are available, like, the qualified improvement property, the NOL, the 163J. There's also some payroll tax deferrals. So we know that that's going to be the next phase of looking at this. And the last phase, as we see this, obviously, it's going to be the transformation of businesses. We see that it's impacting how we all work, how we look about the future, and there's clearly a look forward about how this is going to impact our real estate business, for all the different asset classes. And we're kind of excited about that next phase because with everything that happens in life, there's always a big step forward afterwards, and how we transcend is going to be, it's going to be an interesting approach.
Definitely. And I guess you're seeing these, I kind of want to go back through some of the things you talked about, right? With these immediate financial needs that organizations are experiencing or faced with. What are you guys doing? What are the solutions that are being provided to help organizations sift through that fog?
Right. So yeah, there's a lot there. I think on the surface, the one that jumps out has been the Payroll Protection Program and other SBA funding relief that's available, which for the real estate business, these loans typically, and I'm generalizing, have not been utilized before with the SBA. But now with the way the program was put together, with the robust funding, it really does lend to people trying to get funding for the real estate business through the SBA. For the first time that we have seen on such a wide scale. And so that's one piece of it. But in the real estate business, what is really important is the tenants. And so what we're seeing is even if real estate entities are not able to go after the SBA funding, they can at least guide their tenants to do so, which would help pay for rents in the near term, which would help the real estate business, right? So whether it's direct beneficiary relief or indirect, there's options for real estate entities to explore. And we've been guiding our clients to do that, is to explore that with tenants and see what options are available to them.
Awesome. Yeah, John, that's interesting, right? Because rent is actually one of those covered expenses. For that 8-week forgiveness period, rent is one of those expenses, and I would imagine that the landlords have to be happy about that. Yeah, for sure. I think anyone that says I'm not going to pay my rent, the first question should be, did you apply for the PPP, right? So it seems like a logical step. And hopefully it does help everyone. I think that's always the goal, right? If there's collective help out there, then it should be explored and taken advantage of. And then just to throw it out, because it was so highlighted in the PPP, is the hospitality industry, which was carved out, has its own special carve out that existed, which really in the real estate business impacts a lot of people, right? So if you have a portfolio of assets, even, you're able to carve out hospitality into its own bucket to be able to apply for this program. And really, hospitality has been hit probably the hardest, at least in the short term. So hotels, people are not going to stay in hotels because they're forced to stay home. So how can you kind of provide relief to your people in each of your hotels? And obviously, payroll is one of the bigger expenses. So I think we saw a lot of people take advantage of it or will take advantage of it in the near future. So John, when you say hospitality has been carved out, do you mean that they're carved out because they're looked at by location rather than as a whole organization?
Right. So, the SBA rules for the Payroll Protection Program preclude anyone with employees in excess of 500, with the exception of hospitality being able to look at each individual location with that 500 limit. So we have a client with a portfolio of hotels, and each one is able to apply individually, which again just provides more flexibility and more options for relief.
That's great.
Yeah, and I think it's also just when you look at some of the affiliation rules with the SBA programs that they have out there, passive businesses and rental type businesses have traditionally been excluded from applying from the SBA loans, and this carve out, as it's been mentioned in the CARES Act, is something that has sort of allowed the hospitality industry to kind of continue a bit in managing some of the costs that they have, specifically payroll costs here.
So getting into this madness of the PPP, right? What are some of the things that you guys are seeing with clients? What are they experiencing in the pain points with this process?
Yeah, so our focus with our clients really has been looking at how they structure their business. I think that the way that the CARES Act has been written, when you start looking at payroll costs and the way that some real estate clients structure their businesses with third-party managers or maybe having PEOs, it adds a little bit of complexity, I think, in the way that you try to apply the rule. We've had a lot of discussions regarding, especially let's say in the hospitality, where they may not have payroll directly on that entity, and they're using a third-party provider. These are owner-operators that operate hotels, but the way that they've structured their payroll agreements have been with third-party companies. So that's been an interesting take on this, in the way that we've had to kind of challenge this and ensure that the integrity of the payroll protection program is really there for our clients. And we've seen some movements and some of the clarifications move forward that kind of align to the intent of this program itself. I know John spent a lot. Yes.
Are the employer or independent contractor costs, are those included in the payroll costs in terms of calculating the loan proceed amount?
Unfortunately not, right? So, and I say that because the way that the original bill was structured was in such a way that you know, we're not lawyers, obviously, but we get to read a lot of agreements here and there. And so we've kind of felt like we've had a good understanding of how lawyers write these things. But so independent contractors are not included. When you start thinking about certain businesses, they do operate where they pay people, you know, 1099. And we think about real estate brokerage firms, for example, are one that operate in that type of model. So when they have 1099 brokers, some of them are actually employed, but technically not employed. So what's forcing companies to have to do now is that all those 1099 self-employed individuals have to go and apply for themselves. And I know that there's a coming deadline of April 10th that these sole proprietors effectively have to be applying, and they need to go and reach out and basically take the same approach that some of the other companies are doing and getting relief and funding there as well. I know the affiliation rules has been a topic that they've added clarification for, and I usually defer those questions to John because he has a little bit more patience in dealing with it. But you know, John, you could speak to the affiliate rules there and the challenges for our industry.
Yeah, you know, I think the affiliate rules, on the simplest terms, speak to control and ownership. But when you start diving into them, and the affiliate rules by the SBA are a 30+ page document, real estate gets a little bit of hiccup because of the way structures are set up and the way control is defined with the SBA. So whether it's positive or negative control, I think most joint ventures in the real estate business are going to have that. So either one or the other or both. And so we're seeing the affiliate rules really come into play for a lot of our clients. And it may preclude the ability to apply for the PPP, which is definitely interesting and not something that people probably thought about when they were making these structures and making these agreements. But obviously, who could have predicted this happening? So it's definitely an interesting world to navigate, and there's a lot to it to really make sure that you're able to apply and be eligible for this funding.
Fortunately, we have some useful tools to help with that process, right?
We do. Obviously, we have the COVID task force that we alluded to earlier that's been put together. It's about 30+ people on the Mazars side that have been focusing on this, I would say, for the past 2 weeks at this point. And so we've really, as Carlos mentioned too, we've really tried to interpret this bill, which has been fluid, right? I mean, the bill started and then there was released interim final guidance. There was guidance from the Treasury along the way. And so it's forced us to kind of stay on our toes and make sure we're staying up with it. But we think we've done a good job, and we have a tool put together that's going to help people calculate the pieces of this, right? So phase one in the PPP is going to be the loan amount, which obviously everyone's been dealing with. There's been a rush to apply, whether it was Friday when it went live or Monday being yesterday. And so that was definitely, you know, a piece of the model. But really, phase two is going to be the more involved component where you can try to maximize your forgiveness, and there's a lot of options afforded to you. And so you really need to look at that and make sure that you're making the right choices that are going to impact the forgiveness amount, and make sure you really want to get 100%, right? That's what everyone's looking for. And so how can you do that? You know, and that's where we can come in and help. I think there's going to be some guidance that comes out. I don't see how there isn't. So we'll obviously stay apprised of that information as it does, and make sure we're reading it and interpreting it. And, you know, so far our interpretations have held true. So we'll keep that going.
Definitely. And I think even just, you know, hearing what your interpretations of some of the reactions so far to the relief would be helpful for our listeners as well. You know, what's happening with those impacted in your industry. How are they reacting to the new relief bill and the options?
Obviously positive, as we mentioned, and you know, there's a direct impact that we see where, you know, these loans are really meant to keep employment going, and a lot of the tenants for our clients here, they're going to be the ones that are going to be going out there and applying for that. So our clients, it's an interesting ecosystem, I think, that we all live in, right? Especially in real estate. Real estate is usually paid on the first of the month, and that allows it for them to pay their operating expenses. So around the time that this all came out in March, you know, March was already paid for, right? Everyone had paid their rents. and operating expenses were being paid, and there's a good component out there that for real estate, a major expense that starts to come due, especially in New York, is the real estate taxes. That's coming due in June. You have also these real estate properties are encumbered by debt, so there's bank obligations that they have to pay. So as this was rolled out, at least there's some sort of financial support for their tenants that allows them to pay their payroll, obviously, and allow them to use the funds to pay the rent. As we get further out, and we're seeing that now, is what happens? It's April 7th. How much of the rent has been collected? And you're starting to get signs that some tenants have preemptively reached out saying they're not going to be able to pay, whether it was premature or not. That's really needs to be evaluated, obviously, because some businesses have shut down. Some businesses have strong enough balance sheets where, they can still meet that obligation. But I think you're seeing all sorts of scenarios come into this place where either people are reaching out preemptively, or at least being transparent from a perspective of, look, we're not quite sure how this looks going forward. And that's the scary thing, I think, for everyone, because we don't know how long this is going to go forward. And it's pretty difficult to model out what cash flows are going to be for all businesses going forward and for what period of time. So, for the real estate business, I think it's still a little early. I think we're going to start, the real estate industry is going to start to feel its effect, let's say a few weeks from now, to start to see how May looks and how June looks. And what they're having to do is what most companies are having to do is to have, prudent, transparent conversations with, not only their client, their customer base, but also some of their vendors like banks and financial institutions, to ensure that everybody's aware of the situation and you're taking the right steps to kind of make sure you see the business through.
Okay. So when we're looking at that, right, I think we definitely are going to have to continue this conversation further out with you guys, because I know we speak to phase 3, and we're going to jump back into phase 3 for a second. But phase 4 and beyond, I think there may be opportunities as you guys are learning to come back and speak, to what are some expectations, what are some things we should be doing now as we get closer to the real estate tax deadline and cash flows continue to evolve and change in front of us.
Yeah, for sure. I think if anything, this time requires people to be creative. And so, in a non-creative world, so to speak, where it's, you collect rents, you pay your taxes, you pay your bills, and then whatever's left is left. And so I think people need to try to really think about their business and be creative in the ways they try to go about this. I think everyone's looking at things now for the first time through a different lens. And so, especially in the last, I would say since 2008, 2009, right, it's been pretty fruitful in our economy and in the real estate industry. And so, obviously it's a short-term thing, we're all hoping, and I think people need to find ways to get through it, whether it's helping tenants or helping themselves from the real estate entity side, and seeing, ways they can try to get through and with as little hurt as possible.
So when we're looking about the transformation of business, right, we're thinking of that, what are some opportunities that you guys are seeing here for businesses to transform? How is that happening in front of us?
Yeah, look, I think with anything else, there's always opportunity to kind of change, right? And I think that's what this is acting as a catalyst to change. And I think we're seeing, the rise of e-commerce and e-business all of a sudden being forced to happen. And I think, it's an interesting case study, a live case study of how we can potentially operate, at least in some fashion, right? I'm in an apartment in 650 square feet. I don't know if I could do it for forever, but there's definitely a need to do it as it comes up. And I can tell you my wife and dogs are definitely enjoying it. So, there's that for sure. But, there's opportunity. And I think whether it's repositioning space or repositioning how business is done. And then there's also opportunity with anything else in the market, right? So if there's capital to be deployed in the real estate market and you have it available to you, there's a really strong opportunity that's probably going to be there when we're quote unquote on the uptick of this pandemic. And so I think real estate's very cyclical in nature, as is the economy as a whole. And if you can position your business in a way where as we're coming up, you can take advantage of that, there's dividends to be paid on the back end for sure.
It sounds like it's a good time too to start really thinking about strategic business plans.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I would say the business models have evolved. We've seen real estate obviously go through a lot of changes over the years, and we sometimes take it a little bit for granted how far it's gone. We've had clients build entire communities, bringing residential and commercial space together, building over spaces that weren't there, imagining really what a community could feel like in a very dense population. We've gone from cubicles to shared spaces. We have business models that talk about sharing of not really owning any assets, but now we have companies like WeWork where their model is being now challenged given the I think human concern now, which is how are we going to be sharing spaces with individuals that we don't know, on top of the fact is we have this potential for a relapse in this pandemic again, where this virus could be spreading to people. So a lot of these companies are hurting, but I think we've always seen real estate kind of step up and adjust and make things change for better. We have buildings with a lot of amenities that now are not being used, unfortunately, because of that co-sharing space as well too. But whether that's going to push things back or not, I don't know. But it's always exciting to see what creative people come up with as far as changing their business models and how they bring back to the community and how they can sort of help people's way of living as well too. So there should be a light, I think, in all this. It starts with a good business plan and planning for some contingencies as well.
It definitely does. And you're seeing a lot of that already put into action in some cross-sector activities where, hospitals are reaching out to take advantage of available real estate. Often I'm even seeing it in the state of North Carolina where I am. The higher ed institutions aren't being used, so we're outfitting, their spaces and utilizing that for the hospital support. And it sounds like there's a big opportunity as we're looking, as real estate organizations are looking for opportunities. Here is one, to connect with the hospital sector, and just looking for lots of those, because in my realm of work with organizational resilience, during these types of global crises, there's always going to be more opportunities to be a resource of support during the crisis response. And if you have available space, you definitely are what we're seeing overflow in hospitals and such. So, yeah, you guys have really, it's been some really great information, and I hope that, I appreciate first that you phased out some of the details that you wanted to share, because I know listeners are always just looking for solutions. That's really why we come together and do these podcasts. So thank you guys so much.
No, thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, thank you.
So we usually like to close on a light note of personal preparedness. And John, you mentioned something when we were talking earlier that was very industry specific, but it felt like it was right, nail on the head for this conversation. So could you share that with the listeners?
Yeah, for sure. I think this week we're seeing a lot of activity, a flurry of activity, and Friday is a special day whereby individuals who qualify as independent contractors or sole proprietorships are eligible to apply for the PPP themselves. And so there's some things to work through, but definitely get ready. And, when that goes live, you'll be able to take advantage of the program the same way, entities and businesses have.
That's right. So that's April 10th. Be ready for that date. Okay. hear that. Well, thank you again to all our listeners.
Yes,
Thanks
everyone. And if you need anything, we're here for you.
Definitely. All right. And it was a joy having both John and Carlos join us today.
For more information on the topics discussed today, visit us at mazarsusa.com/COVID-19. That's MAZARSUSA.com/COVID-19. Remember, all information shared on Mazars COVID Talks extends from reputable sources. The views expressed here are meant to serve as suggestive guidance based on the knowledge and expertise of the co-hosts and guests. Thank you.